Good morning and welcome to the City of Santa Fe Sustainability Show. I'm joined today by Catherine Mortimer, Principal of PAX Consulting and former Sustainability Officer at the City of Santa Fe. Good morning, Kat.
Morning, Neal. How are you?
Doing well. How are you today?
Good. Beautiful sunny day today.
It is. I'm glad to be seeing these warmer temperatures after last week, although I was very glad to see all the snow. Glad to see it come and glad to see it go. So I wanted to spend this time in our half hour here for our monthly sustainability show talking about one of the extremely important tiers that sustainability stands on. Back in 2018, City Council approved our Sustainable Santa Fe 25-year plan. And when a lot of people hear sustainability, they might think, global warming, fighting pollution, and whatnot. But this plan is actually built on environmental protection, economic vitality, and social equity as the three tiers that support a sustainable, thriving community in Santa Fe. And Kat, I know you probably single-handedly at the city had the most to do with that plan and its predecessors. So perhaps you could tell us about the importance of that tier and leading with equity in this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Equity was one of those things that has been since the Brundtland report. I don't remember what year that was, but that was a couple decades ago, where it was recognized that equity is a quintessential component of a stable and sustainable community or environment or society. So you think about it, human resources really our most valuable resource. Oil comes and goes and whatnot, but it's human resource that turns those things into the standard of living that we have. And whenever any individual or person or group is suppressed from expressing their or being able to realize their potential, we all lose out from that loss of potential, and we all lose out from the kind of behaviors that oppression results in terms of social behaviors. If you keep somebody down long enough, they're going to have antisocial behavior. Climate change is the greatest challenge to human existence on the planet at the moment, and it's the biggest, probably of our generation. So we need all of the resources available to us to put there, and that means human resources as well. It's also the right and moral thing to do. So those are the, my sense and understanding of why it's so important. I think it's generally important anyway on its own, but to get a stable and safe community, it's also just critical that we address it as well.
Definitely, to truly be a sustainable society here, we need to be, it needs to be equal access to outcomes regardless of what neighborhood you were born in or what gender you are or what tone of skin color you have, so that we can all reach our fullest potential. Because otherwise, this is not going to work very well for the long term. Perhaps we should take a moment and talk about the term equity and how it's different from the term equality. I imagine most listeners are very familiar with, equal rights work throughout the last century and whatnot, but equity has kind of come up in our dialogue more and more in, say, the last decade. So why do you think it is we're talking more about the importance of equity now as opposed to equality?
A very good point. And it came up here in Santa Fe when we were doing some work. We were looking at the different council districts and how much park space there was per capita or per youth or for metrics. And because there was some bond money that was going to go into parks, and initially the thought was we'll divide it equally, but among council districts. But then we did an analysis to show that some council districts already have an abundance of parks and open space relative to their population. And some, especially ones with the greatest number of children, had less. And so to do it equally, you'd give the same amount to each council district, but to do it equitably, you would give more to the council district where there isn't as much already. So they're starting in at a lower level, and yet they're being asked to take the same amount, so everybody raises the same amount rather than doing that. I'm going backwards in terms of my image on the screen. So
Right.
if we accounted for that historic lack of investment in those communities to create an equitable distribution of that resource, that's one way of looking at the difference between equality and equity.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. If the money was spent equally, then it would fund the existing inequality that's in place because of a long and complicated history of in many cases certain neighborhoods were completely redlined for investment because that was where minorities lived, and there's a long history of racism in city planning. I'm not pointing specifically to the city of Santa Fe. It's everywhere in our country and in the world. So I'm really glad to see so much momentum going into doing what can be done to repair and have meaningful conversations about the damage done. And I'm sure you've seen the news that the city council and the mayor are starting a process called the chart process to help advance that conversation this year. And there's a website the listeners can visit to get email updates so that they can be notified about upcoming community conversations or other ways to provide your input, whether it's by email or the best way for you to participate in that conversation. But Kat, let's talk about, you've done a lot of work for the city of Santa Fe in the realm of building codes. You created you were very instrumental in creating our single family green building code that applies to new single family dwellings since, what was how long has that been in place?
It's been in place since 2009.
Since 2009, right. And perhaps, do you want to tell us a little bit about the equity implications of green building?
Yeah, absolutely, and that was a big concern when we were putting this into place. There was a initial assumption, I think, and I think I was not. I kind of had that belief too until we ran the numbers that green building, or another way of putting that is resource efficient building, is more expensive. It adds cost to the initial construction. And so the concern that if we add cost to construction, then those people who are right at the line of being able to get into a home might be kept out of a home. So we were concerned about that. So we looked at some real live situations where we had buildings being built and occupied, and we got people to agree to share their utility bills with the developer. It wasn't with us, and the developer was part of our team devising this plan. And so we wanted to make sure that it didn't create an unintended consequence of making it harder for people to buy homes in Santa Fe. And
Right.
What we found was, because the payback for these investments at the level we're talking about, we're not talking about the bleeding edge and having a complete zero home right away, net zero energy home right away. But in the for the kinds of things we were looking at, we costed out what that increased cost was in real time with real projects, so it wasn't theoretical, and then looked at how fast those improvements in saving water and energy paid for themselves. And it was typically in the range of 5, up at that time it was about 12 years for solar panels, which we weren't really talking about putting in. But for that lower level, it cost about $2,000 to $4,000 more. It got paid back between typically 5 and 8 years for those entry level homes, but that those costs were included in their mortgage, which was spread out over 30 years. So as soon as you pay it, So that meant that it's like getting a loan on a car that's way out, and so the price goes down. But then we're saving money on energy for that loan. So the money they saved on energy and water was a lot more, like twice or three times more than the increase in the mortgage. And so people at that edge, at that first home buyer level, would have more money in their pocket every day from day one, because they were in an energy efficient and water efficient home. And so understanding that dynamic, that it's not a simple, you add cost to the beginning and that makes it more expensive, but looking at it in terms of how much it costs to live in that home, we were able to demonstrate that that it was cheaper. And when you think about it over time, that becomes even more important, because the people's it's a greater percentage of people's income at the lower level, and so it creates wealth essentially for those entry-level home buyers compared to a traditional built home that isn't efficient.
That's a
Santa
good
Fe
point.
currently this Santa Fe just applies this to single-family residential, which includes townhomes and some other multifamily home condos, as long as they're not on top of each other. It's a code distinction. But we have a lot of apartments being built now, and they're not being built to the green code, because the green code has not yet been extended to multifamily nor to commercial projects. So that has been in the works for a while. I understand it's going through the process to get to city council. So that will make a big difference, because that will bring down the costs for apartment dwellers, which is a much bigger percentage of our people that are of lower income. They tend to be in apartments and not in their own homes.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, since 2006, we've been in what's called the Architecture 2030 Challenge, which set a goal to have net zero buildings by 2030 with progressively more stringent building codes to reach net zero new buildings by 2030. And that goal is also restated in our sustainability plan, which set the overarching goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. That means all greenhouse gas emissions within city limits are eliminated to the maximum extent possible, and those that cannot be eliminated are offset elsewhere. And one of the most impactful ways to get there, arguably the most impactful way, is through building codes. As we're transitioning the grid, as PNM is transitioning to more renewable energy per the Energy Transition Act passed by the state, and we're getting energy from solar and wind, where the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. It changes the dynamic of our energy supply and increases the importance of energy efficiency. Although the importance of it is incredibly abundant as is, we're wasting hundreds of billions. I have the number here: $262.5 billion every year wasted on wasted electricity due to inefficiency or transmission. And that's a lot of money that could be stimulating our economy if we spend a little bit more up front. When it comes to energy efficiency, it's a matter of when you're going to pay, not if you're going to pay, because you're either going to pay to waste the electricity or you're going to pay to conserve it with an efficient building. We've seen on our single family homes here, I think, Kat, you told me that we've done a study of the increase in the upfront cost of being 2 to 4% of a higher cost to build a home to our green building code. Is that right?
In the lower ranges, it's the lower percentage, because we require a higher energy efficiency for larger homes. So yes, that is the range, and that actually came from the National Association of Home Builders. So it wasn't, which is a fairly conservative group. So that is probably a fairly conservative number, but it's the number we used. We wanted to be conservative.
Right. I mean, I think about these codes is almost like building the home well. I mean, it's about saving energy and saving water, but it's also just about a sturdy dwelling that keeps the cold out or keeps the heat out, depending on what time of year it is, which is incredibly important. And you look at what's happening in Texas when they get a cold front and all the pipes breaking and whatnot. And if there was more insulation around the space where those pipes are, we might have been better off. I don't know a whole lot about building code requirements in Texas, but just giving a good example based on what we're seeing in the news right now, just these being better dwellings aside from saving energy and water. It's not like you turn on the shower and it's a trickle. I mean, I imagine many people who have bought a new home in Santa Fe may not have even known they were buying a green home. Everything seems to operate just the same. And
when you build a new home under the green code, there's a posting that goes in the window and it can't be removed except by the new owner of the building. So at least there's that that's made available in their front window. It's kind of hard to miss. So we try and make that available.
Right. And yeah, so we have, yourself and our prior green building code specialist, Alinder Bangert, wrote up the extension of that green building code to multifamily dwellings. And we are, currently working on the game plan to move that forward and getting the staffing needed for, enforcing new codes and whatnot. So look forward to advancing that this year, in addition to the fact that the state of New Mexico just adopted a new energy efficiency code, the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, with a few amendments to make it relevant to New Mexico. So that means all new buildings, residential and commercial, will be 25% more efficient as that code goes into effect sometime around now. I think March is when it will be officially in effect, and the city of Santa Fe has just adopted it as well. So aside from our single family residential, that'll apply to multifamily buildings and commercial buildings. That'll have a big impact for people, whether it's a small business leasing or someone in a multifamily unit for the new ones. Anything that's built before this year doesn't have to comply with that. But it's great to see the impact where there's a negligible cost upfront for the developer, the builder, and then that those savings are experienced by our LMI residents that are living in those multifamily units as they pay less for their electricity and their water. Kat, I wanted to ask you about with PAX Consulting, you're doing some work in the in this green building space for Las Cruces. Is that right?
Yes, we're working with Las Cruces to develop some requirements for city projects, municipal projects, to save water and energy. And so I'm in the information gathering phase now. Their climate is different than ours, obviously, and there's been some interesting things I've learned about that. And it kind of points to when you really get down to trying to save more energy and water, it becomes important. How you do it becomes very important relative to where you are. And so you get down to that level of detail, and it's no longer one size fits all the way a building code is intended to be. But you really have to understand the local climate and opportunities and weather patterns and that kind of thing to figure out what tools will work and what tools won't work. And so I've been really impressed with the staff down there who've really embraced this this challenge head on, and everybody seems to be really excited and looking forward to leading by example, focusing on leading by example down there.
And if any of the listeners are interested in PAX Consulting and what you do, what is your full suite of services? Are you an environmental consulting firm or?
Yeah, like it's kind of sustainability consulting, which is an outgrowth, I would say, of environmental consulting. So helping cities, counties, states, and businesses develop their plans for how to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, how to increase their equity, and how to identify their biases, and in order to really achieve equity, because we all have unconscious biases. When we see someone, our brain tries to fill in the gaps with experiences we've had, and while that it's a good shortcut for when you meet a new person to try and figure out what they're all about, but it has the residual bad effect of assigning characteristics which don't necessarily apply to those people. And it's just, it's human nature, but it's something we have to become very conscious of in order to eliminate and treat people the way we want to actually treat them, true to our own values. So there's that. And so this, I do have an expertise in sustainable building techniques, practices, code development, that kind of thing. And that's what I'm doing down in Las Cruces. But the range of expertise that I bring to the business is broader than that. So yes,
Great,
and this is my
yeah.
website. So
Right.
Welcome people to go and check it out. I do have a list of offerings and that kind of thing, but I've been a professional in the area for a long time, and I've kind of had different positions where I've seen sustainability from different perspectives, and so I do bring more to the table than I even have listed on the website. So and I'm of course happy to talk to anybody if they have an idea and they want to explore it and figure out how they should move forward. So feel free to contact me.
And that's PAX, P-A-X, paxconsulting.biz. I imagine you can do a Google search for PAX Consulting and find your way there. If you're looking for
another
local
consulting, so it's the .biz.
All right, great. Yeah, make sure it's the Santa Fe one. Yeah, thanks so much for being my guest today, Kat. I just kind of want to wrap up what we've talked about in our last few minutes here. It's when we're leading with equity in our sustainability work, there might be a tendency to think that green building has negative impacts on affordability and makes houses here and living here more expensive. But if you look at the life cycle costs and the mortgage you're paying for a single family home, then that is not the case. You'll actually save money over the term of that mortgage. If we're looking at multifamily, then the builder or developer has to pay a negligible amount more while the tenants save money month to month. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
There's a number of communities that require rentals to disclose the average monthly utility bill, so that people who are seeking an apartment can compare. So if one has a cheaper rent and you're thinking, oh, I should get that one because it's a cheaper rent, but then you look and see, oh my God, the utility bill is how much? I can go to this other newer, more energy and water efficient one, and while the rent may be a little higher, my utilities are a lot lower, and in the end, it's actually cheaper. And so to provide that information, and there are kind of apps that do that, that you can employ. So, in order for people to really have all the information, the consumers have all the information, then, we have to figure out how to get them that information. So that's one way of doing that.
I really like that idea. We'll have to consider that in our policy discussions going forward here at the city. So Kat Mortimer, principal with PAX Consulting. Thank you so much for being my guest today. This has been the City of Santa Fe Sustainability Radio Show. We're on Suave Radio every fourth Wednesday, 8:30 to 9. So tune in next month. We'll be talking about saving water for the Wyland Mayor's National Water Challenge. Hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.